Good afternoon. Now it's on now, isn't it? Yeah, I got your attention now, don't I? Good afternoon and welcome to my calculations, at least, the 2,435th meeting of East Chapel Hill Rotary. I am Mike Clayton. Everybody pretty much knows me as one of the top 57 Rotary presidents in club history. But today I'm their Sergeant at Arms. And for all you people out there going, hey man, Felix is the 58th president. Well, the Cliff Butler year is an exception, and we just refer to it as the Butler year. So with that, we're going to go into today's Rotary business because we've got a full program today. Again, I'm Mike Clayton, I'm your Sergeant at Arms, and so nice to see everyone here today. Even Dr. Frick showed up. That's a good thing. I'm going to pass around the fine basket. If you did not attend a Carolina Olympic sport last year, please give and give to the girls. And on that note, we're in the first month of the year that we have sports for the rest of the year. Isn't it wonderful, folks? We got Olympic sports starting, UNC volleyball coming up, all those kind of good things. Field hockey will be coming up soon. Volleyball starts next week. Men's soccer. Big day in American history today for all you history buffs. Let me put a little trivia on you here. On this day, in 1980, 1981, MTV debuted on cable television, and its first video, fittingly enough, was "Will Video Kill the Radio Star?" Pretty, 3 seconds serendipitous if you ask me. A lot of you know I'm retired now, so I've got a lot of time on my hands, and we've had a hell of a heat wave over the last few weeks. So I've kind of got some observations and some insights I want to share with you about the heat wave we've had. It's been so hot that a friend of mine told me his cows were giving evaporated milk. Yeah, he reported it, you know. I talked to another friend the other day, has a bunch of chickens, and he said they were laying boiled eggs. I said, damn, it's hot, you know. Steve Frommy told me he saw 2 trees actually chasing a dog trying to get wet. He said it, folks. I'm just repeating it here, okay? You know, it's so hot that polar bears are now flooding Amazon with orders for sunscreen. I'm just reporting this now. You think I'm up here making this up? Maybe or maybe not. Let's see. The Statue of Liberty was asked to lower her arm I mean, the folks, we're talking hot people. Okay, not your ordinary, we're talking hot. You know? Do we have any guests or visiting Rotarians today? Well, I've got a little pause before I keep laying all this wonderful knowledge on you folks. Lorenzo, who you got?
Yeah, I got my friend and neighbor, Tanya Helms, who's visiting us for the third time.
Welcome, Tanya. We're glad to have you here today. Who else?
My wife, Nora Holly, is here visiting.
Welcome. Please come back and join us again. Judy, back in the back.
I have a guest, Brian Spencer, who just retired from 40 years of HR corporate and is starting his own consulting business. But the highlight is he's married to Nora Spencer, founder of Hope Renovations.
Welcome. Any visiting Rotarians today besides John Pruitt? No. Well, we've got a whole lot on schedule today, but I'm going to leave you with one final thought on this heat wave. It was so hot when I was coming into town the other day at a stoplight. One of the bums had a sign up and said, "I will work for shade." But that would be President Felix.
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon. Welcome all on this beautiful day. I have some quick but important announcements. One is we have a well-wish card for our good friend DG going round. So please sign it and I'll collect it at the end of our meeting. And thanks to Jody for making it happen. Now our teacher supply store event is around the corner, happening on August 19th, 20th, and 21st. This is one of our cornerstone service projects and a very powerful way of how we show up for our teachers. Now, if you have already donated, thank you very much. If not, please consider contributing. This year, we want to serve every teacher just like the way we did it last year, and we can't do this without your support. We also have a few volunteer spots available, and volunteering is a fantastic opportunity to get engaged hands-on with one of our impactful projects. So it's a great experience. Please consider getting engaged. And with that, we have a very special moment, and I'm going to call upon our past president, Omar, to come lead us in the induction of Rebecca. Omar, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone here today. For those who don't know me, my name is Omar Zinn. And one of the special traditions of our club that's developed through the years is the induction of new members, which is presided over by one of our past presidents. It's my distinct honor and privilege to serve in that role today. It's a great day when we can induct a new member into the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club. Our club always needs infusion of new blood, while at the same time extending the spirit of Rotary in the world and increasing the usefulness and influence of our Rotary Club throughout our community. Today, we welcome to our ranks and admit to membership, Rebecca Parilla. That's spelled P-A-R-I-L-L-A. Oh, it's spelled P-A-R-R. I-L-L-A?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca.
Common mistake.
Rebecca, you have not only joined East Chapel Hill Rotary Club, but you've also joined a worldwide organization of more than 33,000 clubs in over 200 countries and 1.3 million members. You will be warmly welcomed by Rotary members and Rotary clubs anywhere that you may travel throughout the world. Rotary membership is an honor and privilege, and also carries with it some duties and expectations. Rebecca, you will be expected to regularly attend our club's meetings, participate in club service that you will learn more about, and to be active in the many fellowship activities that are offered. I encourage you to learn all that you can about Rotary and this club. Become engaged in the life of this club, and as I was told by a member when I first joined, you will look forward to every Friday when you can say, I get to go to Rotary today. You will find that this club will celebrate with you when things are going well, and when necessary, offer support when needed. Always remember the Rotary motto, service above self. The goal of Rotary is to encourage the following ideals: the development of fellowship as an opportunity for service, high ethical standards in business and professions, the opportunity to serve society, and the advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace. Continued on back. Rotary challenges all of us to live by the Rotary four-way test in all that we say or do. Number 1, is it the truth? Number 2, is it fair to all concerned? Number 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Rebecca, do you accept this commitment?
Wholeheartedly.
Beautiful. Then I would like to ask all of our members to rise, please. Rebecca Padilla, in the name of the Rotary Club of East Chapel Hill High. It is my honor and privilege to formally admit to you membership in our club and ask Jennifer Player to present you with the Rotary pin, which was previously done before this moment here. So Rebecca, if you don't mind, everyone please have a seat. Applause. Rebecca, if you don't mind, please take a minute or two to tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, where you're from, your life, etc.
2 minutes. You have always made me feel welcome from the first meeting that I attended. This is my 4th. It's surreal to me because I grew up with my dad as a Libertarian in Puerto Rico. It was always a part of my life. Little did I know at my age I was going to actually join. But anyway, a little bit about myself. I am born and raised in Ponce, Puerto Rico, for those of you who have been. I'm a woman. I'm really glad to add to that, to this group. I'm a proud member of the LGBTQ community. I have 2 kids in the Chapel Hill Carborough school system, one rising 7th grader, one rising 9th grader. Not at East Chapel Hill, at Carborough. I am a professional in the area of inclusive leadership and learning and development, / DEI. So we are not having the best time right now. What else? I've been in Chapel Hill since 2016. I moved here from Chicago, where I lived for many, many years. I saw, I think his name was Ed, wearing a Cubs shirt. I am a die-hard Cubs fan. Yay! I hope they get to the playoffs this year. So thank you so much for your warm welcome.
Pass it back over to President Felix.
Welcome to East Chapel Hill, Rebecca. And without further ado, I'm going to call upon Jim Hebner to come introduce our speaker for today, our very own Mike MacMillian.
Today's program is about wealth, about money, and it's a topic that all of us can agree on in that respect. We would all like to have more than we have, and we would like to do less than we do to get it. I think would be a good place to start. But our
speaker today is very much at home on the national and international stage when it comes to dealing with folks of great wealth. When you think about the repositories of great wealth, and well, what comes to mind is Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Earl Chesson, Morgan Stanley. Earl, there'll be a fee, extra fee for that plug you asked me to put in. And he started to talk about that here today. And as you can see in the biography here, he is spectacularly well equipped to do that because he has been a part and parcel of the changing of the rules of American investment, and particularly publicly traded stocks. That makes it easier today for us to create wealth for all people, and he talks about that in his book. And he is a writer, and you can tell it, radical problems and simple solutions. And that, of course, is the theme for what he'll be talking about here today. So please welcome our own member, our own star, Mike MacMillian.
Well, thanks, Jim, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today to address the group. If I'd known this came with a parking spot right out front, I would have volunteered to do it earlier. But contrary to what Jim says, he did warn me. He said, don't get up there and try and sell your book. So I did order some books to bring. They didn't arrive, so I can't sell the book. But what I would like to do is to try and sell you today on the ideas that are in the book. And I've titled this A Revolution Hiding in Plain Sight for reasons I hope will become apparent as we go along. So the book is called, as Jim said, Radical Problems, Simple Solutions, How Markets Can Help Fix the Retirement Crisis and Solve Wealth Inequality. And in it, I argue that the advent of low-cost, broad market, exchange-traded funds, fractional shares, and low or no-cost stock trading are opening the door for the economically disadvantaged to invest in markets, build long-term wealth, and better prepare for retirement. I observed these changes over the course of a 35-year career in financial services, public relations in New York City. That's me on the back right over there, standing on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange. It's one of our clients at the front who was ringing the opening bell that day at the exchange. Over that time, I saw commissions charged on different kinds of financial products go from 7, 8, 9, 10% down to 0. I saw all kinds of innovative new products and services introduced, some good, some not so good, and all kinds of new technologies that made things better, faster, and cheaper most of the time. And that covered a period from roughly 1984 to 2018. Oh, whoops, that's my daughter's wedding, so I don't have that guy in there. Little wedding. Anyway, so let's go back to 1993. To my mind, that was the year everything began to change. That was the year State Street introduced the S&P 500 ETF Trust, better known as the SPY, and the ticker SPY. SPY was the first ETF available on a major stock exchange and open to investing by everyday investors. So I don't know if everybody knows what an exchange-traded fund is, but briefly, it is I guess the best way to think about it, an exchange-traded fund is like a traditional mutual fund that trades like a stock. Like traditional mutual funds, ETFs are governed by the Investment Company Act of 1940, which allows for the pooling of money to invest. They are essentially companies. They have a board of directors. They file a prospectus that includes all kinds of information about the strategy, diversification, costs, management, and so on. And like most prospectuses in this world, no one ever reads them. While traditional mutual funds have a portfolio manager typically supported by teams of analysts and traders, who pick the stocks and bonds where they'll invest. This is known as an active process. So traditional funds are typically actively investing. They're trading stocks and bonds all day long on the exchange. All those people who are involved tend to make a lot of money. That therefore makes the process a bit expensive. And you can't buy a traditional mutual fund shares during the course of the trading day. If you're going to buy a fund, you buy it at the price that, at the close of the day, whether you buy or sell, that's the price that you get. ETFs, by contrast, track an index that's comprised of some number of stocks and bonds. So that could be the S&P 500. It could be another well-known one is the Triple Q, which holds the 100 largest non-financial companies in the NASDAQ. And those are typically technology companies these days. The ETF owns a percentage of those stocks or bonds consistent with what's in the index. So if the S&P 500, Microsoft makes up 3% of the S&P 500, then the index will own 3% of Microsoft, and so on for the other positions. In addition to intraday trading, ETFs have a few other advantages over traditional mutual funds. The expenses of overseeing an ETF are typically much lower. They don't have a portfolio management team trading all day long. They are what's known as passively managed. That in turn translates into a lower cost of ownership. Also, due to the way they create shares, they have certain tax advantages. Most of them generate little or no in the way of capital gains taxes over the course of the year. So they've been investing in indexes before the advent of SPY, but most of that was done by institutions. SPY opened that world to individual investors. Maybe not surprisingly, the introduction of SPY was kind of met with a yawn by typical Wall Street folks. It took 20 years for SPY to reach $3 billion in assets, which is a relatively modest sum. And a lot of Wall Street folks were pretty skeptical about, whether the idea would ever catch on. Ned Johnson, who founded Fidelity, was sort of typical of what was said. He said, "I can't believe that the great mass of investors are going to be satisfied with achieving an average return." And at the time, Fidelity was owned by people like Peter Lynch, and they were beating the market in some cases, so you can understand why he had that attitude. And, it is a bit un-American, I suppose, to shoot for average. We're kind of Lake Wobegon folks. They like to think everybody's a bit above average. But, there's a lot of reasons why this is a good approach for investors. The first index was created by Charles Dow in 1884. Charles Dow of the Dow Jones Industrial Index fame. But the two individuals most responsible for modern day indexing were John Bogle, who started Vanguard, and Burton Malkiel, who was an economics professor at Princeton. Malkiel is the author of A Random Walk Down Wall Street, which, to my way of thinking, is probably the best general interest book on investing that's out there. And Malkiel was a big fan, and is a big fan of indexing. But neither was exactly recognized as a prophet at the time. And Malkiel told CNBC in 2020 that when his book was first reviewed by a professional in Business Week, the reviewer said that it was the biggest piece of garbage in the world, ridiculous advice. Malkiel had argued in the book that a blindfolded monkey throwing darts at stock listings could select a portfolio that would do just as well as one selected by professionals. And he pointed out, correctly then and correctly now, that very few active managers beat the indexes, and the ones that beat it one year typically don't beat it the next. Sort of coming out of that idea, back, I think it was in the 1990s, the Wall Street Journal started a contest in which they would think one of their reporters have him or her throw a dart at the stock tables, pick a stock, and then they would ask a professional money manager to pick a stock, and then they would track them over 3 months and see who won. And I'll tell you, we had some portfolio managers that did that. And the dart thrower beat them often enough that had a hard time finding anybody to do it after a few years. So they stopped doing that feature. So, you know, it's true. But anyway, MacMillian's insight, the idea of indexing, provided the basis for what now is a huge industry in ETFs. As of the end of last year, there's roughly $10 trillion invested in ETFs in the U.S. And earlier this year, Morningstar reported that more than half of all the investment assets in the U.S. were invested in some kind of passive fund. Vanguard alone has about $3 trillion in assets under management, and SPY, the first ETF there, has close to $570 billion. So it's a different world than how it started 40 years ago. Speaking of women and our new member, the person who did the lawyering around SPY was a woman. Her name was Kathleen Moriarty, and she became known as Spider Woman for her work on Spider. And she was sort of a legend in the business. She died a few years ago, and she did a lot of the more complex ETFs that were out there. How did we get here? If you take a look back at the evolution of retail stock and bond investing, here's what you see. It was once what you might think of as kind of a priest caste of financial intermediaries, brokers and advisors of various sorts, who interceded between investors in the markets. There were commissions and high trading costs and bid-ask spreads that typically favored the house. I think investing for many people was a big mystery, and to some extent maybe intentionally so. Now over the years, technology has started to break down these barriers one by one. The first important development was the deregulation of stock trading conditions in 1975. That cleared the way for new discount brokerages like Charles Schwab, which opened its doors in 1971 as a traditional brokerage, but then pivoted to discount in 1974, I believe. 1975. On May 1, 1975, which then became known as May Day, firms were allowed to set their own prices rather than charging a fixed price for trading. So to sort of further stretch the church metaphor, which is kind of the start of the Reformation for Wall Street. Charles Schwab in the role of Martin Luther, nailing his 95 Theses, or in this case, his discount trading offer, to the door of the stock exchange at the corner of Wall and Broad. Writing about this in the Wall Street Journal on the 40th anniversary, Jason Zweig, a columnist here, noted that prior to deregulation, an investor buying 100 shares of a $25 stock would pay a $49 commission and would be on the short end of the bid-ask spread on the stock to the tune of about $13. So the total cost was about 2.5% of the transaction. A pretty big haircut. But at that time, fixed commissions had been on the New York Stock Exchange. It's been a rule in New York Stock Exchange for about 180 years. So the chairman then, James Needham, predicted that deregulation would, quote, bring disaster to the many. Needless to say, that's not exactly what happened. In the 50 years or so since, it's becoming increasingly less expensive to buy and sell stocks. And this sort of reached its logical conclusion with the launch of Robinhood in 2013, which offered zero commission trading. But for those of you who know the business, no one should take this as an act of altruism on the part of Wall Street. We're not doing anybody any favors necessarily. In the book, I liken this to a scene from the 1980 film Breaker Morant. The story takes place in South Africa during the Boer War. There's a German missionary who's killed, and 4 British soldiers are arrested and accused of war crimes for his murder. So in the run-up to the trial, the person who's supervising brings the prosecutor into his office and sort of lays out what he expects him to do. And then after a bit of a preamble, he says, needless to say, the Germans could care less about the Boers. They're just after the diamonds and gold. And the prosecutor replies, I see, sir, they lack our altruism. So no one should confuse the May Day events as an act of altruism. And in fact, free trade is not as free as they look. Someone's still paying. In this case, what's going on is what's known as payment for order flow. Someone's paying for the right to trade those shares, customer shares in Robinhood behind the scenes. And that trading firm may just make fractions of a cent on each transaction, but the volume is so big that they can make a profit. But the point is, to the customer, this is mostly invisible and to some extent irrelevant. What's really important is that it's a long way from the pre-Mayday cost of 2.5% to do a transaction. And it's not just Robinhood now. Big firms are all doing the same thing. Vanguard, Fidelity, State Street. Everywhere you can buy and sell shares of an S&P 500 ETF for basically nothing. And the expense ratios, what they charge you as a shareholder to invest there, are also close to zero. This has lots of repercussions. It makes trading easy, and in some ways maybe too easy. Research shows that in general, for most people, buying and holding a portfolio of stocks and bonds, diversified portfolio, is the best strategy, and not really trading much at all. But more importantly, it reduces the amount of money lost to fees and commissions and other charges, and that's generally good. It keeps the money in the portfolio. Every dollar paid in a fee or commission is a dollar that's paying for someone else's job. Now, I know we have some financial advisors in the audience, and I know that all their clients have yachts, but that's not necessarily typical in the industry. So, all right. So now we have lower nose cost trades. We have ETFs. And a third critical development was the introduction of fractional shares, the ability to own part of a share. Fractional shares have been around for a while, but they really took off in 2019 when interactive brokers entered the market, and other brokerages have since jumped in. A fractional share is just what it suggests. It's part of a share. It allows an individual to invest in a stock based on how much money he or she has versus the price of shares. So, you can see the advantages of this. For $100 or whatever you have, you can build yourself a somewhat diversified portfolio, sort of like you would get with a mutual fund or an ETF. Or you could buy a share, part of a share of Berkshire Hathaway, which would, Warren Buffett's company, which otherwise costs you about $700,000. Two other technologies that have helped investors take advantage of all these developments. One is the introduction of robo-advisors. The other is the availability of automatic investment plans. So a robo-advisor is algorithm-based technology used to build portfolios. Investor answers some questions, typically online: age, income, investment goals, risk tolerance, and so on. And the algorithm recommends a portfolio. Once you establish an account, you put the money in it, and the robo-advisor allocates it according to whatever strategy or strategies you selected as the investor. And they typically use ETFs to build the portfolios, again, because they're cheaper and easier to deal with. Betterment's an example of somebody who does this. Wealthfront is another. Burton Malkiel is on the board of Wealthfront. Automatic investment plans are another technology-driven innovation. And anyone who's had a 401k knows how this works. Basically, your employer deducts money from your check every week or month and puts it into the plan, into your portfolio. The automatic deduction part is kind of the key. You never see the money, so you don't miss it. And here again, research has shown that when the default option for an employee is that they're included in a 401k, they don't have to choose to opt in, participation is much higher. Here there are companies like Acorns and Stash that have investing apps that work sort of in the same way, but with everyday spending. So you link an account to the app, you go out and you buy something for, say, $4.50. The app rounds that up to $55, takes the extra 50 cents, puts it in your account, and when you get enough money in the account, it'll begin to invest it in a portfolio. Again, they typically use ETFs, And with some of these apps, you can do that with as little as $5. So it's a very low threshold to participate. Okay. So all that brings us sort of to the main point, what it means for fixing the retirement crisis and addressing wealth inequality. So we hear a lot about both these days, and there are a lot of numbers out there that talk about this. Here's a few. Roughly 60% of Americans have some exposure to the stock market, but ownership's clustered at the high end of the income scale, the top 1% accounting for about 54% of the total, according to Gallup. More to the point, 40% own no stocks at all, so they're effectively excluded from one of the two primary paths for creating wealth in this country, the other one being homeownership. The disadvantage of this compound over time and over generations. About 67% of the total wealth in the United States was owned by the top 10% of earners as of the third quarter of last year. The bottom 50% of earners had just 2.5%. And by some accounts, you see this a lot, nearly half of all Americans have less than $500 in savings. But as we're seeing, this doesn't have to be the case. Technology's made it possible to invest very small sums, and those sums then have the opportunity to grow. So the reality has changed. The challenge now is to make individuals aware of this reality and to bring them into the market. And fortunately, there are organizations and people out there that are working on this. One that I discuss in the book and that I'm very familiar with is a group called First Generation Investors, or FGI. FGI was started at the University of Pennsylvania in 2018 by 3 undergraduates there, two brothers, Dylan and Alex Ingerman, and a friend of theirs named Cole Maddox. Dylan and Alex, this is an aside, are both from Summit, New Jersey, where my wife and I and our family lived for 35 years. Dylan's friend with our youngest son, Tucker. But anyway, FGI works like this. FGI developed a curriculum to teach high school kids about stocks, bonds, and investing in the market. It then goes out and recruits college kids in various cities to teach the course in high school. And focuses on what are known as Title I schools. By one definition, schools with a certain percentage of the kids are in the free lunch program. The schools are typically located in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, and they're typically populated by economically disadvantaged kids. The course itself lasts 8 weeks, and once they're finished, the kids are given $100 in real money to go out and invest. And provided they graduate from high school, they get to keep the money. The program has reached about 3,000 kids so far around the country. Participating universities include, in addition to UPenn, Stanford, Harvard, Georgetown, Duke, and episodically, I would say, UNC. So the program that the course that they teach is different than the traditional financial literacy courses that you see in schools. North Carolina started requiring by law, I think, 2 years ago. It's geared toward young people who may not care much about mortgages or credit cards, but they do care about money. In one lesson, which when I was sitting in, I found very interesting. The instructors referenced a tweet by one of the Jenner Kardashian clan in a discussion of idiosyncratic and systemic risk. Idiosyncratic risk is sort of one-off risk, and systemic risk is large macro risk, like say tariffs, for example. So apparently a few years ago, Kylie Jenner was no longer using the social media app Snap, and said so on Twitter. Snap was a publicly traded company at the time. And Bloomberg wrote, in one tweet, Kylie Jenner wiped out $1.3 billion of Snap's market value. So the stock cratered. But while Snap was down that day, the broad market was actually up. So in my book, I wrote that from this we can conclude that the Jenner Kardashians are clearly an idiosyncratic risk. So, in our area, the Duke students have actually been sort of leading the way with the FGI program working with kids in the Durham schools. The initial program there was led by a junior named Nisa Namias, himself a first-generation American. I did a couple of stories on this one for the Indy, I did something for the Barons, I did something for Yahoo Finance on. For one of them, I think it was this piece, Nisa told me, quote, the reason it's called first-generation investors is because none of these kids' parents have had a chance to learn what they're learning. The goal is to stop the cycle of some people working hard and investing, and others working just as hard, but never having the opportunity to accumulate wealth. So these kids get it. As Niso told me, the idea they find most fascinating is the power of compounding. And one of them said, this compounding is insane. And they're right. So just to take an example, if you're an 18-year-old kid who's in the FGI program, gets the $100 as he or she finishes up, invested in an S&P 500 ETF. That ETF then returns, roughly 8% a year, which is kind of the average return for the S&P over a long period of time. At 8% a year, it'll double every 12 years, more or less. Then they hold the ETF till they're 80, say. That's 5 doubling periods. So that $100, when they turn 80, is worth $3,200. If it's $1,000, it'd be worth $32,000. So, that works for them because they're young and they have time on their side to let the money grow. So what the FGI is saying, and what you see is it's not a lack of interest, it's not a lack of intelligence, it's not even really a lack of money that keeps these kids in these situations from investing. It's really a lack of opportunities, a lack of being exposed to what's out there. Let's be honest, traditional pensions plans, as we know them, are not coming back. No one's starting any new ones, and they're closing a lot of the old ones. The Social Security Trust Fund, as we've all heard recently, is on schedule to run out of money in about 10 years. The reality of Social Security is it's basically been a Ponzi scheme for most of its life. And if you ran a private pension plan like that, you'd probably be in jail. And more to the point, neither the traditional plans nor Social Security encourage much in the way of independent thinking or self-sufficiency. Neither engage people with the world around them. It's also important to note, I think, that neither holds assets that are inheritable. When you die, money goes away. Investing in the stock market can help address this. Starting young means these investors will have a chance to see their portfolios grow along with the economy. And the kids in FGI, at least, are real first-generation Americans. They come from Africa, from Latin America, and in one instance I know here in Chapel Hill, I have a kid who's from Myanmar, via Thailand. So whatever you think about it, the current level of wealth and equality is clearly socially destabilizing. You can see that in our politics. And while markets are mostly about money, they're not just about money. There are lessons to be learned there about persistence and patience, about human nature. Every day on Wall Street, the window opens on the human experience. Greed, despair, hope, joy. And the value of the insights gleaned there compound as well. Not everyone's born rich, but everybody's young ones. And the idea that we need to start young to address wealth and equality is starting to gain some traction. Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, wrote about it in a recent annual letter. Young people, he said, have lost trust in the older generations. And the burden is on us to get it back. Maybe investing for their long-term goals, including retirement, isn't such a bad place to begin. So technology is making this possible. It is, as I like to say, a revelation hiding in plain sight. So thank you, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer if I can. Anybody?
I'm sorry, what? Mike.
Jim, yeah.
You used as an example there at the beginning of what would happen to $100, but that was a one-time investment. You didn't really talk much about what we would like to see, which would be regular, systemic, habitual investing, because that's really the key to being able to build true wealth. If you started, if every kid, whatever they earn starting when they get right out of school, they put 10% of what they earn into the stock market, everyone would be able to live very comfortably upon retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, yeah, you assume that people would save consistently, and if you're using some of the apps that I mentioned, that you get automatic savings, you know, that contributes to the growth of your wealth over time. I mean, the important point I'm trying to make is that it's starting young is really the key, because you have the years in front of you, and if you look at the way compounding works, if you even think about that example, it's really the last 1 or 2 periods where all the growth occurs. In the first few years, it's relatively small, but once you've got up to $10,000 and it doubles, it's $20,000. So it's much bigger in the latter years. Yes.
Thanks, Mike. That was quite entertaining.
Interesting to listen to. I talk to so many people who are smarter than I, particularly about crypto. And I'm now convinced that I absolutely don't understand what I thought I once upon a time did. One of the things that I have understood, at least from those who are fans, is that it democratizes, if you will, the opportunity for investment. And I guess I'd just like to hear your points of view about that relative to, if you will, the traditional investment strategies that we're all familiar with.
Well, I mean, that term democratizing investment has been used a lot in the ETF world, because it opened different strategies, hedge fund strategies and so on, to retail investors that they didn't have access to before. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, and you're seeing now a big push around private equity. I would say the general belief in my side of the world was, by the time this stuff gets to retail investors, it's probably a little late in many cases. But regarding crypto, I am not by any means an expert on that. My favorite remark about that, MacMillian's a columnist for Bloomberg, and he said early on, he said, the only 2 uses I can find for crypto are for buying drugs and stealing people's money. Yeah, I haven't seen too much to contradict that. The only reason you buy crypto that I can see is it keeps going up. You know, I don't know what people use it for. Every use case I've seen, inflation hedge, you know, this and the other, it hasn't proven out so far. But it does keep going up. So, you know, that's all I can say about that. That's all I can say about that. I don't know.
So far,
I'm Jim Kurz, I'm at your table. You mentioned a program where it will round up your purchases and invest those.
Right.
And I think of this group of people that don't invest, but they do use credit cards. Have any of the credit card companies looked into tapping into that process as a selling point? Say, okay, well, every purchase, round up and we'll put that in a little investment account. That seems like one good way to tap into this community that does not invest.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I don't know. I'm not aware of anything like that, but I don't know. And most of these are relatively small sums, but you know, you're creating a habit of people to save and invest. And I think the other point is, that I think is compelling about this, is as Americans, we're not particularly good at wealth redistribution. We don't like to pay taxes, but we've been good at wealth creation. So the benefit of this is bringing people into a positive way into the creation of wealth, and to engaging people who otherwise feel left out of the economy in the economy. And just as a quick reminder, one of the things they require the kids in FGI to do is they pick a stock and do an analysis of it. So they have to understand, you know, what does this company sell? What are the factors that influence purchasing? How does, what does a tariff do to what selling aluminum or whatever? And I think that's really helpful for kids who may otherwise feel they see this stuff now. I mean, they TikTok or whatever, there's people consuming money everywhere, but they don't feel part of it. And it can help bring them into that world a bit. Right?
Thank you very much, Mike. Mike, two questions. What?
You're not going to ask about the World War, are you?
Sorry.
I'm not going to ask about the World
All
War.
right. Okay, Mike, two questions, if you don't mind. One is income inequality. CEOs getting those yachts. Your answer to that question. And then there's been talk about exchange no longer having social security, but having everybody invest their money in the market. I obviously like that. Your thoughts on both?
Well, I try to stay out of the politics of wealth inequality. The point I think is that we should all recognize is that it's socially destabilizing. You get odd political outcomes when you have people that are feeling left out of the economic and political process. And you get polarization like we have now. So it's just not sustainable to have the polarization of wealth. And we need to find a solution there. In my view, is consistent with our historical values of free enterprise and hard work. The other question was.
So you don't have an answer to the inequality 300 times, and then the other one is should we?
Well, we know Trump proposed something to create private accounts for people. We'll see. I tend to shy away from government-funded solutions. Social Security is not disappearing. The trust fund is running out of money, which will, if that happens, we'll have to cut benefits. But it's not going to go away. No, as long as we have somebody to keep working, children.
Yeah, that was great talk, and it's a great idea. What do you see as the challenges or the impediments to whether it's expanding FGI or just teaching people how they can invest even small amounts to make a big difference, over their lifetime and so on?
I mean, the impediments they've had, I think, is just getting people out in the colleges to get them out into the classrooms to teach, and then, there's an inherent problem because the college kids graduate, so you have some consistency issues, and you also have the bureaucratic issues of dealing with the schools, where fitting into the curriculum that the schools teach is it's a hurdle. It's not insurmountable, but it's something that they have to address. I mean, one of the things that has been good, and this happened in Durham, North Carolina, started requiring financial literacy courses 2 years ago. This fits into the financial literacy slot, and the teacher doesn't have to do it. So they can bring somebody in here to do it, and it meets the requirement, part of the requirement at any rate. And it saves the teachers the effort of having to learn things that they're not familiar with. But I think the bigger challenge is just going to be to keep expanding it. The $100 that they give the kids is funded by private companies, a lot of asset managers. And they got a lot of money. They can keep doing that. That shouldn't be a problem to raise money from J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs or wherever to fund it. So it's just a question of getting the structure out there and keep rolling it out and making people aware of it, I think.
Okay, two things. One is say again what ETF stands for.
Exchange Traded Fund.
Okay. And then what would happen?
Can you hear me then?
Yeah.
Right. So, what would happen if we really did have a stock market crash like 1932? I mean, we're probably not going to have that for the reason they had it, but what if there really was, what? People would just get wiped out, or what would they have going through that?
Well, if you own the S&P, you would lose 80% of it maybe, but historically the markets have always rallied. And over the long, I mean, again, these kids anyway, they're 20, 18 years old, long horizon. They did, FGI was started in 2018, you had COVID post that, so they were going through that market correction. And I think when you're teaching these lessons, you just have to teach people to focus on the long term. And as Jim Grant, one of our old clients, said, in the long run in America, the buyers have been right and the sellers have been wrong. So, that's what you have to believe. Yes, Brenda.
Yeah, Mike, thank you. Let me share with the club. Mike knows this, but he didn't mention it. Our club actually sponsored an FGI module 1 year, and we had big challenges. We could not get into the Chapel Hill schools because, they're taking care of their kids, and there's a limited budget, and there's limited resources, and we only could do it by contacting a basketball coach who knew kids who were Title I kids, and we did it through the Parks and Rec program. We could not engage with the school system. And then separately, we found that the team at UNC was great 1 year, and then the next year was not followed through. So those are some of the limitations. Some schools have pulled it off very well, and I think they have a better partnership with their school districts.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say Duke did better than Carolina, but it's always fixable.
The Lorenzo Black, why would the schools not do it?
Jim, we're busy teaching math and science. We're concerned about the security of our children. You contact the school. Please be my guest. Contact the school and say, we have a great program we want to bring in and see how far you get. And I contacted the Public School Foundation as well, and it did not lead to anything. It was easier to just get someone who knew kids, and we did it outside of the school.
I can talk to that in a moment, because I faced the same. I'm sorry. Well, I was talking about what getting into. I can talk about getting into the schools because I'm familiar with that from our scandals program. I face the same problem for scandals program, and the schools, like speaking to the administrators doesn't good. The teachers are the ones who must teach the curriculum. But if you can find the right teacher to let you in, that's how you get in. We've had great success in White County with career development center teachers. But it's different. At Chapel Hill High, I got in by speaking to someone in line at the farmer's market at the mall, and who had just moved here and said he had 2 daughters, and one was a teacher at Chapel Hill High, and I spoke to her that day. You have to be persistent. That's it.
I think that's right. That's how they got started in Philadelphia, is calling teachers up.
Very good, thanks.
Mike?
Yes.
Mike, thank you very much for your comments. Very insightful. But it brought back some memories of my own life. We talked about how we tap into college kids, etc. I would also take it a step further and say it starts with parents. In my own personal situation, my father, right after I was born, put $10 a month into a savings account, which doesn't seem like much. But by the time I was 10, it was $1,000. So he sat me down and we looked at the stock market. He said, how would you like to spend it? So I spent a lot of time doing research, etc. I was obviously interested in doing that. And I picked international paper and Gulf oil for some reason. So we invested that $1,000. And by the time I got here at Chapel Hill, by the time I could get a car my sophomore year, that $10 a month bought me a brand new Corona Toyota. So it was a great way for me to live through this process and actually have a tangible result at the end. So to me, the earlier the better. And parents, ideally, should be talking to their kids as soon as they can about something like this.
Yeah, I mean, you had the advantage of parents who were aware of that. And the kids who started this program, their parents mostly worked on Wall Street. So they knew that they had these advantages that other people didn't. And many of their parents probably don't speak English in the house because the parents themselves are immigrants and the kids are the first generation here. Yes.
This is all about numbers. Sorry. This is all about numbers, but how do you crank in the inflation factor? I mean, these numbers get a little reduced when you look at the money you get out is also dropping out at 4 or 5% a year, or 3, something like that.
Yeah, we have to talk to somebody else, President Trump.
Next week.
I don't know. I mean, you know, the 8% of the S&P is I believe, a post-inflation number. So it's a good number, over time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Have a nice week.